Has Iran's claimed 1 million-strong army now pushed Israel into a deeper state of military anxiety? As the manpower crunch hits Israel harder, is Netanyahu now preparing to take an extreme step? Stretched from Iran to Lebanon, Israel's military may now be forced by Netanyahu to extend active combat service. Did the IDF chief's repeated red flag warnings fall flat as Netanyahu moves to extend service for more troops? Is Iran now throwing an open challenge at Trump's forces while preparing a large-scale welcome on the battlefield? Despite a troop shortage, Israel is under growing pressure as Iran warned that a 1 million-strong force is ready. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is reportedly considering plans to extend Israel's mandatory military service period. Netanyahu may revise conscription laws to make Israeli soldiers serve longer combat duty, according to Kan. Israel's cabinet secretary reportedly said that a new draft law could be introduced in the near term. This move comes amid reports that the IDF warned its military structure could soon collapse. The Israel Defense Forces are reportedly facing a shortage of 15,000 troops, including 8,000 needed for combat roles. IDF Chief Eyal Zamir has reportedly sounded the alarm over Israel's widening troop shortage crisis. Zamir reportedly told a recent security briefing that the IDF could collapse in on itself. Israeli media reports also said the IDF chief demanded an extension of mandatory military service. The IDF chief said, and I quote, "I am raising 10 red flags in front of you. Right now, the IDF needs a conscription law, a reserve duty law, and a law to extend mandatory service. Before long, the IDF will not be ready for its routine missions and the reserve system will not last." End quote. Expanding operations in Gaza, Lebanon, and the war with Iran have placed increasing strain on Israeli forces. Israel's Central Command has reportedly said West Bank operations are placing additional pressure on available troops. Israeli military officials reportedly warned that missions are increasing while the number of available troops is falling. Under current Israeli law, citizens are required to serve 32 months of mandatory military service. However, proposals are now being discussed to extend the term of service by another 4 months. Netanyahu may still face resistance from ultra-Orthodox communities that oppose being drafted into military service. It is also worth noting that ultra-Orthodox allies nearly pushed Netanyahu's government toward collapse over the draft law dispute. Reports that Israel is facing a manpower crunch come as Iran prepares for a possible US ground invasion. On March 26, Iran claimed it has a 1 million-strong regional force ready for battle. Iranian media released a video on X indicating that military preparations are now underway for a possible battle. The footage showing those war preparations was released by Iran military media on March 26. Armed soldiers prepared for combat on land and in the air could be seen in Iran's military video. Iran also suggested that proxy groups across the wider Middle East region may join the battlefield. Iran described itself as a true master of ground warfare in an open challenge directed at US troops. Iran's challenge to Trump comes amid reports that the United States has deployed more troops to the Middle East. Soon after Iran's video, Trump extended the deadline for the pause on strikes against Iran's energy infrastructure. On March 26, Trump said the pause would continue for 10 days at the request of the Iranian government. But Iran denied it had asked Trump for a longer pause, according to Wall Street Journal-based reporting. This came as Trump said Iran was very smart during a cabinet meeting in Washington on Thursday.
This morning I want to give an update on the Operation Epic Fury, which is an appropriate name because we are absolutely obliterating them. Over the past 3 weeks, we've been hitting Iran's military capabilities at a level that few people have ever seen before. People never knew there was such a capability. We have the strongest military anywhere in the world by far. I built it during my first administration, and I used it during my second administration. Unfortunately, because I'd rather not have to use it. But it's a display of force and precision and skill like nothing the world has really witnessed, although you got a pretty good witnessing of it in Venezuela also. And that was a smaller version of what we're doing now. We're crushing their missiles and drone stockpiles, destroying the defense industrial base. We've wiped out their Navy completely, their Air Force completely. We've wiped out a large percentage of their missiles. And the missile launchers, without the launchers, the missiles don't do any good. and we've knocked out probably close to 90% of the launchers, probably more than 90% of the missiles themselves. Between some they fired and more than they fired, we knocked out. We've also destroyed a lot of the factories. We're continuing to do that, but a lot of the factories where they manufacture the drones and the missiles. The drones, too, are way down, but the reason they're down is they go one way and they don't come back, because for the most part we're shooting them down. But we also are able to, we've really done tremendous damage to the places where they make them. And just so we set the record straight, because I've been watching the Wall Street Journal's fake news and all these stories that get printed like, oh, I want to make a deal. They are begging to make a deal, not me. They're begging to make a deal. And anybody that saw what was happening over there would understand why they want to make a deal. But they say, oh, we're not talking to them. Anybody would know they're talking. And only a total fool. And they're not fools. They're very smart, actually, in a certain way. And they're great negotiators. I say they're lousy fighters, but they're great negotiators. They are begging to work out a deal. I don't know if we'll be able to do that. I don't know if we're willing to do that. They should have done that 4 weeks ago. They should have done it 2 years ago. Or they should have done it when we first came into office, because 2 years ago they had free reign under Biden. Sleepy Joe, worst president in the history of our country. When he allowed to happen to our country at the borders, and even with a thing like this. But not just him. Every president for 47 years, every president should have done this. They should have done it a long time ago, because you cannot give lunatics a nuclear weapon, and they would have had a big one. It stopped really when we did the B-2, but even before that, the Barack Hussein Obama, what he did where he gave them the Iran nuclear deal, gave them free will toward a nuclear weapon. Basically, he chose Iran over Israel and others that didn't want him to do it. But I terminated that deal. Had I not terminated that deal, you would have had a nuclear weapon years ago, and it would have been used, guaranteed. And one of the reasons you know about the guarantee is because their neighbors were sort of like bystanders. They weren't involved very much. They didn't choose heavy sides. They didn't want to, because people were concerned with Iran. There was a big black cloud over the Middle East. They were concerned, but all of a sudden the war starts, and they start shooting at these five, in particular, 5 countries. They start shooting at Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Oman. They start shooting at them, and everybody was shocked, including us. You know why? Because they're sick, and they had a plan to take over the Middle East. And some of those missiles that were shot at them were locked long before we even started this process. They were locked and loaded and aimed at those countries. They wanted to take over the Middle East. But we happened to come along, so it wasn't so easy. So right now their navy is sunk in the largest elimination of a foreign navy that has taken place, maybe ever, but certainly since World War II. Their air force is gone. Their anti-aircraft and communications capabilities are totally dismantled. And one of the problems they do have when they deal with us is we deal with people, and the people aren't able to communicate with anybody else. So, because all of their leadership has been gone. The first level is gone, and they met to pick a new level, and they're gone. They're all gone because they didn't make a deal, and because they're sick people. They're really sick. They're really sinister, sick people. And if anybody thinks it was okay to have a group of people like this to have nuclear capability, nuclear weapons, and if we didn't attack with the B-2 bombers, they would have had a nuclear weapon within 2 weeks of that, maybe 4 weeks. But between 2 and 4 weeks, they were planning to have a nuclear weapon. If we didn't hit them at that time with the B-2 bombers, and one of the great air raids in history, maybe the greatest, dark at night, no moon, no light, every single bomb hit its mark and just obliterated that place. So it's now buried deep under earth. And it was an amazing thing, but they would have a nuclear, and they would have used it without question. And you know that because why did they shoot all these countries that weren't even really involved with them? They weren't involved. They had no big problems because they're sick, because they want to take over the Middle East, not just Israel, Certainly Israel would have been the first on their list. They would have used nuclear weapons, you don't need too many of them, but they would have used a nuclear weapon on Israel, and they would have used it on the neighbors, and then they would have come after us. And if we had a weak president, they would have done great damage. But fortunately, you don't have a weak president.